Hello everyone, how are you today? Today I want to discuss something that is important for us to take into account in our everyday lives, but also in our collective lives as oceanic humanity, as a human family moving forward. For the past month or so, as we've been undergoing the portal and higher elevational resonance of the event or the new moon equinox portal, we have been coming collectively to a place of greater clarity in regards to our own individual issues that we need to resolve as we move forward into these higher energies. In order to manifest our destinies as energy workers, it is necessary that we are able to understand ourselves as well as others. Written above the temple portal of the Oracle of Delphi, as well as every Egyptian temple or pyramid, were these words: Man, woman, know thyself. For by knowing thyself, you also know the gods and the goddesses, which is a Hermetic truism, as above, so below. What is within us is also outside of us. And by understanding who and what we are able to understand the world as well. In my own personal spiritual journey, as well as my material journey through my life and this world, I have found this to be true. And I'm sure many of you also can look back upon your lives as well and see examples of how this occurs in the mundane events that you have experienced also. So, in this context, in the context of a higher resonance of energetic forces here on planet Earth, and are leveling up in gameplay, are reaching the next board of this particular video game, quote unquote, in this holographic universe. Now that we are at a different space, it is important that we become aware of the types of influences that are affecting our everyday lives, not just as individuals, but also as a collective. Now, there are certain truisms that have been known by humans for many, many, many thousands of years. And there are traditions all across the world that have spoken to the nature of our world and our interaction with higher dimensional entities. And by higher in this instance, I'm speaking primarily of 4D, which is the astral, the near and distant astral. The ancient Gnostic traditions had certain terminology that they used to describe entities that we now consider to be alien. There is a philosopher and a writer who appeared in the 1960s and early 1970s who wrote a series of books. His name was Carlos Castaneda, and he wrote books about a magician, a Mexican magician, that he met out in the Sonora Desert named Don Juan Matus. And he learned many things at the feet of this master of trickery, if you will. Now, I'm not here to argue with anyone about the nature of reality or whether or not so and so was real, if someone was a fake or not. I have read the texts, I know the arguments, but I choose to take truth where I find it and to understand it contextually and define it according to my own lived experience. All across the world, there are traditions that speak of the existence of a race of beings. This race of beings is intimately connected to humanity and has been present within the life of oceanic humanity for many, many millennia. No one knows how long exactly, but we do know that there was a state before they arrived and then a state after which they arrived and begin to impress their dominance upon the human species. Now, in the Bible, there is a phrase that is used that bears upon this topic. This phrase is powers and principalities. In the ancient Gnostic texts, there is a variation of the quote or the verse in the Bible that speaks of the existence of these powers and principalities, the rulers of this earth. They are the rulers. They are also known as the Archons. In the ancient Gnostic texts, they speak of the Archons of of having existed and come to the earth from the outer darkness. Some people have interpreted the ancient Gnostic texts to speak of the descent of Sophia, which is truth, and is also an entity, a greater entity from the center of the cosmos who descended down into materiality and who became the planet Earth, who became Gaia Sophia. And in that becoming, created what we now know as the Archons, or as Don Juan Matus calls them, the Flyers, or the Foreign Installation. In Native American traditions, this energetic arrangement of consciousness effects is called Wetiko. And it speaks to something that in the East, in the Buddhist traditions, is known as the monkey mind, which is the constant chatter to which we are each subjected day in and day out. It is with us when we wake, accompanies us throughout our days and every experience that we have, is with us when we are attempting to fall asleep, chattering, rushing like a waterfall of noise, of words. And there's nothing that we generally can do to stop it. We can't control it, in the very least. In fact, we don't even affect it, unless it is only to change the focus of its attentions, which we do very well. If you'll stop for a moment in silence and actually listen to your thoughts, you will actually see that you are not in control of those thoughts. Do that now. Do you see? You are not controlling that flow of thoughts. Now, you may interject a thought in the form of subvocalizations that changes the direction of those thoughts, but if you do not do that, they will continue. Where do those thoughts come from? Are those thoughts you? Do you self identify with those thoughts? Do you say I in your mind to yourself? Have you noticed that in many cases, those thoughts take on a very negative cast? That they are self referential, they are self negating, and they are also very low energetically oriented. Those thoughts are constantly putting you down, putting others down around you. They are concentrated upon the most lowest energetic constellations of energy interaction possible. Is that not so? They are paranoid, they are rude, they are base. They also bring things into your minds that are totally against who you believe yourself to be, and yet these thoughts just appear. And they invite you to comment on them, to interact with them, and to agree with them, and to claim them as your own. I, me, mine. But are they really your thoughts? Are they truly you? Now, in the Buddhist tradition, the point is to attempt to still the mind, to watch the flow of thoughts as they pass by, but not to identify with them, not to contribute to them. And this is an effective strategy for life, not to identify with the thought processes in your mind. By not identifying with the thought processes in your mind, they eventually seem to slow, to become less receptive to external influence and less intrusive in their effect upon your experience and interpretation of the world and the events that you personally partake in. Now, this consciousness that seems to interject within your very mind, that seems to want you to believe that you are it, is what Don Juan called baroque and heavy and dark and filled with fear. And for those who listen to this voice most often, that fear is what rules their lives. That fear creates the prism through which they view the world in every interaction that they have in and with the world. So when you ever interact with people who are filled with fearful, low vibrations, often those people are listening constantly to that voice and believing that voice is them and understanding the world through that voice and its perception of the world, which is always dark, which is always fearful, which is always concerned with the most material and base interactions and results in our lives. Don Juan said that the flyer feeds upon us, that it exists as kind of an overlay over our own field of awareness, and that it drinks our energy and it loves our negative energy and our low vibrational energy that we emit. So, of course, that means that the flyers love fights, they love arguments, they love suspicious thoughts, they love darkness of any sort, and they attempt to cultivate that within those whose fields they enjoy. It is possible to release yourself from the influence of the flyer, but it's not something that can happen indiv- uh, individually at a fast rate. It's something that can take time. There are ways to hide from these energies. The Gnostics speak of some. There is the existence of a space of being called the Nymphion, Nymphhion, which evokes tantric streams of beingness and interaction, which is of interest to those who follow the twin flame path, as well as those who follow sexual energy and kundalini paths of energetic expression. So, yeah, I just wanted to give you all something to begin to think about. This is just our earliest exploration of this idea, something to be aware of. And for many of you, this is going to be something that is very difficult for you to integrate within your own understanding of the world. And I understand that. If you rail against this idea, if you begin to tell yourself, no, this is not true, this cannot be true, well, that is the flyer mind within you speaking to you. And whether or not you believe that is up to you. What I encourage you to do is to go out and to begin to do research on your own, to see for yourself what's out there in regards to this topic, as well as the influence that this energy has on you individually and collectively. Because the flyer is not alone. The flyer is in constant communication with other flyers, and there's a hierarchy within the archontic greater collective body, just as there is within the human collective body. You know, the Gnostics said that the head archon is blind and deaf, and it is a god, the god of the Old Testament, and they called him Yildiberath. So yeah, there's a lot of information out there for you to go and look at if you're interested in doing so. But this is indeed the topic of topics. This is a very important topic for us to get our minds around. Even if we don't want to believe it fully, at least understand that in an infinite creation, at infinite levels of consciousness expression, there are higher levels of consciousness at a more rarefied energetic space of beingness that we cannot see, but that surrounds us constantly, and that we actually can sense when conditions are perfect for doing so. And that these energetic consciousness collectives can indeed interact and see us. Now we look around us at the grass and the trees and the animals and the birds and the bees and all that, and we tend to think of them as being there for our use, and we imbibe them, we eat them. Well, what if there is a form of consciousness that sees us in a similar manner, that eats us, that imbibes us, for whom we are the cattle, for whom we are the sheep? There are human sheep and wolves, but what if humanity itself was a race of sheep. And there is a race of wolves that has been hurting us for a very, very long time. Well, I'm going to leave it at that for now. I'll talk to y'all soon. Be well and blessed. Peace.